Good evening. It is 5 p.m. and we are calling our special meeting to order. We will start with a roll call of our board members. At this time, we'll take a roll call. Director Song and Director Cook are attending virtually via Zoom this evening. I will call each board member's name, and if they're present, they will say present. Director Song.
Present.
Director Cook. Director Cook.
I don't see him on here.
Okay. We will go through the remainder of the roll call, and then we'll pause for just a moment to see if there's anything that we're waiting for someone to be admitted to the room. Director Clark.
Present.
Thank you. Vice President Farah.
Present.
And I am present. And we'll just pause for just a moment to see if there's somebody that is waiting. Okay, seeing that. Did we get somebody else? Okay, we will continue to move on and we'll check in periodically to see if Director Cook is able to attend. Director Clark, can you say the Pledge of Allegiance for us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome everybody. This is a special meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. We welcome the public's participation in this board meeting and thank those of you who have come to this meeting and those who are viewing via our live stream. For purposes of the board meeting, it is for the purpose of board meetings, it is the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from visitors. This evening's special meeting public comments are limited solely to the public hearing and the published topic, 2024-2025 annual district budget. Whether made verbally in person, verbally on video, or written, comments are limited to a total of one per person. All forms of public comments are subject to Chapter 4256 RCW Public Records Act. All comments must adhere to Policy 1420 and Procedure 1420P. If you wish to make a public hearing comment to the board, comment forms are available for completion prior to the meeting. The public hearing will be held after the presentation. Please turn in your forms as soon as possible in order for your public hearing comment to be heard at the appropriate time. Students will be first to speak for this public hearing. Please state your first and last name prior to the beginning of your testimony. Abusive comments personally directed towards the board, staff, or students will not be tolerated. The use of specific names or personal identifiable information of board, staff, or students is not allowed. Board members or KSD staff members may interrupt or terminate an individual's statement when not adhering to Procedure 1420P. All comments, whether verbal or written, must adhere to the standards of civility as defined in Policy 1400, Meetings Conduct, Order of Business, and Quorum. If you're seated in overflow room, there's a brief delay in the live stream audio. We will allow extra time for you to make your way into the boardroom after your name is called. Individuals with items for the board or superintendent must provide them directly to safety services staff. Approaching the dais during the board meeting is not allowed. Any items turned in will be provided to the board and superintendent following the meeting. Director Farah, will you read the land acknowledgement for us?
Let me turn my mic on first. Now we have the fancy mics. We acknowledge we are gathered upon the ancestral lands of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, who historically lived throughout the area between Cascade Mountains and Puget Sound.
Thank you very much, Vice President Farah. We now move on to item 2.01, the 2024-2025 budget work session. This, I remind everybody, is our number 4 presentation, and this is our final presentation. And I call upon Superintendent Vela.
Thank you, President Margell. Members of the board, I'd like to invite Mr. Raul Parongal, our Executive Director of Finance, and Lisa Tyler, our Budget Director, to begin our presentation this evening.
Just before you do, I just would like to take one more check. Has Director Cook joined us?
I am here. Are you able to hear me?
We can. Thank you very much. And I just encourage Director Cook and Director Song to mute their microphones to avoid picking up background noise during the presentation.
President Margell, Superintendent Vela, and member of the board, good evening. Tonight we have a short presentation, which is a similar presentation that we had in the last 3 sessions. And we will be led by our Director of Budget, Lisa Tyler, in the presentation.
Thank you, Raul. Good evening, President Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and colleagues. So tonight, as has already been stated, the purpose of this work or special meeting is to present for one final time the recommended budget for adoption for the 24-25 school year. And I can say that over the previous 3 presentations, nothing material certainly has changed from the prior presentation. So we're just providing one final review. And before I start with the reviewing the budget, I just want to make reference to 2 documents that have been out there available on the website. This is what we refer to as the budget, or the FY'25 document. This is what you're actually adopting. This is the district's annual budget in complete detail, if anybody cares to read page by page. And then we also develop and provide this document. It is also the budget document referred to as maybe the user-friendly budget or the citizens budget, a little more easily readable. And in the back, it actually has separate pages for each individual school. So if you're curious about what your specific budget for your school looks like, you can refer to this document here. Okay. So just a quick review on how we got here and what the process for budget adoption is. Again, by law, all districts must adopt a budget, and that must be done by August 31st prior to the start of the upcoming school year. We all use the same budgeting format, which is, again, the FY'95 is the document that is submitted to OSBI, and that's what is formally approved and adopted by board resolution. And remember, what you're adopting is the level of expenditure, so you're approving and adopting the expenditure authority for each of our 5 funds. And then again, throughout the year, the districts may not exceed the amount that we adopt and approve here tonight. And if it looks like we're going to do that, then we would have to go through a budget extension process to accommodate those overages. Another point I'd like to make is that, remember, we are adopting budgets for all 5 of our funds tonight, which would be General Fund, Capital Projects Fund, the Debt Service Fund, Associated Student Body Fund, and the Transportation Vehicle Fund. I'll be covering the amounts of those budgeted amounts later in the presentation, so I won't go over the definitions of each fund just yet. Okay, what you see here on this slide is just truly a summary of the recommended budgets for all 5 of our funds. First of all, I'd like to make note that our projected ending balance for fiscal year 24, this current year that we are just about ready to finalize and close out, those ending fund balances are what we use as the basis for our beginning fund balance for fiscal year 25. So that's where the beginning fund balance figures come from. You can see our total amount recommended for a budget is $609 million. That's for all funds. And of that 609,537 is general fund. And you can see here, the yellow line are the budgeted amounts for each fund. And again, what you're approving and adopting is that yellow line, the level of expenditure authority. Okay, this slide here just shows a comparison of last year's budget, or fiscal year 24, to the recommended budget for fiscal year 25. You can see overall, again, across all 5 funds, we are seeing a reduction of, or a reduced budget amount by $23 million. You can see, though, that the majority of that is in the debt service fund at nearly $23 million of that total $23.4 million. And the reason for that is you budget for your debt service fund strictly based on your debt service needs. So our needs in the next upcoming couple of years, actually, is just less than it has been over the past few years. In comparison, you can see general fund, we're actually up 7.1 million. So it just depends on the fund as far as what that comparison number would look like. Okay, now let's go into enrollment and some staffing issues or data. So again, I think we all know that enrollment is really the basis for our budget, and how our state funding, especially state funding, our funding is determined and calculated based on the state's prototypical model. So for fiscal year 25, the upcoming school year, we're projecting a student headcount of 24,275, and an annual average FTE, which is the basis for our funding, of 23,940, almost 23,945. So that 23,945 really is the basis for all of the next upcoming slides, which is the basis for our budget. And using these enrollment numbers, that drives our staffing levels of certificate staff of the 1975 FTE and classified staff of 1167. Now this slide I just wanted to make note of what is our rationale for not assuming enrollment growth. First of all, economic indicators still indicate that birth rates are declining or certainly staying flat. So we're not anticipating growth in the lower grade levels. And then you can see over the past years, we just do not see enrollment growth. So without having data to prove otherwise, we maintain a stable or flat enrollment projection. Okay, and this slide again is sort of just backs up the previous slide. The first column is our projected over the past several years. Those are our projected numbers by enrollment category. And then for those years that we have closed out, it's actual FTE. And so the difference over here in the green column or the far right column, that shows the difference between budget to actual. You can see there were a couple years where we really over budgeted our enrollment, and that's dangerous to do when you're basing a budget on too high of enrollment. But the past couple of years, you can see, again, this backs up. We're really in a very stable or flat enrollment environment. So staff FTE. So in an attempt to, I'll say realign with our lower enrollment levels, we have through normal attrition and the IBT process, we have reduced classroom positions in the upcoming school year by 75.5 FTE. And again, that was through attrition and IBT. And many of the positions over the past couple of years that were funded through ESSER, we will be maintaining the majority of those positions through using some of our grant carryover funds for the next year. Now we will have to readdress that decision next year, but for the upcoming year, we were able to maintain a lot of those positions. So of the 75.5 FTE classroom positions, there's a net effect going on across programs and between certificate and classified staff. So overall, our FTE total, again, all staff, we've reduced only by 20 and a half FTE. And you can see, if you look at this chart, I know there's a lot of numbers and it's probably a little small to really drill into by way of this presentation, but you can see there's puts and takes throughout programs and between certificate and classified. For example, if you look at inclusive ed, it looks like our certificated staff are down 4.6 FTE, but on the classified staff, we're increasing by 36 FTE. So, you know, it's again, decisions about how we're staffing, the levels of staffing, what the funding sources will be. So you kind of have to just look at it, state, federal, other resources, the type of staff and the funding source, so. Okay, so again, if you think about our total staffing FTE, here is where those staff are located. So 75% of our positions are in teaching and teaching support activities. 12% is in district-wide support, which would be positions such as your non-leadership professional technical positions, your district-wide support staff like custodial, nutrition services, transportation. I think that covers that. School administration at 8% is your principal and other school leadership positions. And then central administration is at just 5%. Let me just back up. So, and remember, total personnel costs make up over 80% of our total budget. Okay, now let's move on to revenues. So this slide shows revenues by major source. And the series of these next three or four slides, they're going to be in the same format. So you're going to see a chart like this comparing 3 years, so actual of 23, projected of fiscal year 24, and then the budgeted amounts for fiscal year 25. So you can kind of see how the changes are occurring over the past few years. And then kind of a percentage of where our resources fall as far as where do we get the majority of our resources. So in this slide, you can see the difference over the 3 years based on source. So typically, our sources, we break them down by local, state, federal, and other. So you can see over the years, you can see the differences just by following the chart. But as a breakdown of where we receive our revenues, in the fiscal year 25 budget, state resources make up over 76% of our total revenues. Local resources, which includes our property tax, makes up 16%. And federal revenue sources, which are grant programs, make up 7.3%. So again, majority of our funding comes from state and local resources. And the next slide is the same data, just shown in a different visual. So you can see, it just kind of depicts, the slices of the pie per se. So again, your total state, which would be state special and general purpose, makes up, well over 75-ish%. And then you've got your federal revenues, so you can just kind of see proportionately where our revenue sources come from. So same format of the slide. Now we're looking at expenditures. And this shows expenditures by major program. And typically, we're looking at basic ed, special ed, career or CTE programs, district-wide programs. Again, same format, so you can see year to year, we show a fiscal year 23 actual where we project our fiscal year 24 amounts to come in at, and then our budgeted amounts for fiscal year 25. And if you look over my percentages off to the right, the expenditures in our budget under basic ed programs are nearly 50% of our total expenditures. Inclusive ed makes up almost 17.5%, and then our district-wide support expenditures come in at just shy of 20%. And then again, so this is the same data, same information, just shown pie chart-wise. So again, you can see slices of the pie. Basic ed is where we spend the majority of our money, with special ed coming in, you know, our second largest expenditure by program. And then the third view of expenditures, would be by object or type of expenditures, and typically these are broken out by salary cost or personnel cost, and then what's referred to as MSOC, which would be your materials, supplies, and other costs, which would be all non-employee related costs. And so again, we're looking at a 3-year comparative view, and you can follow the amounts for yourself, but again, personnel costs are running at about the 82% of our budget, and other MSOC or MSOC expenditures are at 18%. And those percentages are of the fiscal year 25 budget. And then, so one more time, the pie chart view of the same data. So again, salaries make up the most significant portion of our total budget at nearly 82%. Okay, so this is a view of our budgeted fund balance. Again, comparing fiscal year 23, where we were at a fund balance, we ended that year with a fund balance of 63 million. The budgeted fiscal year 24 fund balance was budgeted at nearly 51 million. And we're budgeting our fund balance for fiscal year 25 to be around 46 million. Now, I want to point out that if you look at the beginning fund balance for budgeted fiscal year 25, the amount we show there of 55 million, keep in mind that number was projected much earlier in the summer. That number will change. Right now, it's probably more in the lower 50s. So again, that number will change. So as that number changes, obviously the ending fund balance number will change. So later this year, when we present our financial statements on actuals for fiscal year 24, we will then have that updated number, and both ending fiscal year 24, which will be the beginning fiscal year 25 number, which ripples down to our new projected fund balance number for fiscal year 25. Okay, this slide this is a required slide just to show the comparative between the amount that the district receives in MSOC resources, MSOC budgeted resources, or revenues for the MSOC expenditures based on the formula, which is based on our enrollment. So we're budgeted, the state formula drives the $38 million in MSOC revenue. We have budgeted to spend, you can see 63 million. So budget versus the revenues that we receive based on formula, we are budgeted to spend $25 million more than what we actually receive in funding for MSOC costs. Okay, so in summary, this is just a true summary comparing last year's budget to this recommended proposed budget of really all of the slides that I've just gone over. So it shows revenues up in the top section of a total of 527, almost 528 million. Expenditures by program of 537 million. Revenues greater than, or expenditures greater than revenues by 9.6 million per the budget. So driving a budgeted ending fund balance of $46 million. So when you look at this, the takeaway might be that 9.6 million kind of deficit. We're still working off of the fund balance that we received with the ESSER funds, so we still need to keep, I'll say, dwindling away from that deficit. So the next, that's the work we still need to do for the next year's upcoming budget development, is to continue to draw down the resources from ESSER, or the reliance on the ESSER funds, sorry. So Okay, now I'm going to turn over to Raul to discuss or to review our forecast.
One of the things that we need to do in the budget development and also for the submission to OSPI is to prepare a general fund forecast and also on the other funds. What you see here are the assumptions that were used, and I have to emphasize assumptions. Forecast, you can only do forecast by using some assumptions. There are things that we know today, and there are things that we don't know. And so for that, we have to use assumptions. And so what you see here are the projected enrollment. You also see the IPD, which is a known factor because those were provided by OSPI. And then also the assumption for the basic education allocation and also the class sizes. Now, those class sizes and ratios assumed to remain flat all the way through the 27-28. We also added the step and column adjustment, and that is the movement into the salary scale. And so we calculated that to be about 1.25%. And so just because we have the existing employee in place, every year when they stay with us, they are actually moving a step in the salary scale. And if they actually bring in additional credentials, they could potentially move a column. And so when we calculated that over the last couple of years, that averaged to about 1.25% improvement in the salary for each and every employee. Here we also eliminated the one-time revenues and expenditures for 25-26, and those are revenues like ESSER, that are no longer going to be coming back to us. And if there are also expenditures associated with that, those are not included in the out years. And so resulting from that, we calculated what the revenues and expenditures and the resulting surplus or deficit. And so what you see here in 24-25, like Ms. Tyler presented to us, 9.7 million deficit for 24-25. But I think what is also alarming is that if you look at 25-26 all the way to 27-28, you see a 6.5 million deficit all the way to 12.8 million deficit in 27-28. Well, naturally, if you look at that and look at the ending fund balance, you will see a 46.2 million ending fund balance for 24-25, but by the end of 27-28, that amount is about 19.7. And so you see how quickly it is actually draining. Now, just to put them in perspective, our monthly operating cost is about $45 million. And so if you look at 24-25, that is worth about a month of operation. When you look at 27-28, that is approximately 1.5 weeks of operation. And so the significance also here is that how are we able to rectify this? 24-25 is what you're adopting tonight, but 25-26, we're going to be experiencing the same. And so we have this opportunity for us to rectify this ahead of us. And so one of the things, or there are three things that comes to mind. The first one is, how do we implement efficiencies in our district? Efficiency doesn't necessarily mean reducing service. It could mean doing more for less amount of money, and how could we do that? So we are looking at many areas in the district where the demand for services is increasing, but how can we do it with the existing amount of resource and the existing technology and infrastructure that we have? The second one is increasing our revenue, enhancing our revenue. Now, how do we do that? And so just making sure that we tell our community to enroll, come. And so because we're actually funded by enrollment. And also we're grateful for the community for passing the EP&O levy, because that actually definitely helped us. And the third one would be reducing expenditures. And so I did that purposely in sequence. We first need to look at efficiencies, increase our revenue, and then finally, once we exhaust those two things, then we need to look at budget, the expenditure reductions. We could do one of them, both of them, or all of them, all at the same time so that we could rectify this. The ultimate goal is to be able to make all this red to a black so that we could stop the bleeding in our ending fund balance.
Thank you, Raul. So just to finish up our presentation for tonight, I just want to cover the budgets, the recommended budgets for the other 4 funds, which I think this data has already been presented, but let's go through it one more time. So for the Capital Projects Fund, the purpose of this fund is we're accounting for the resources used to acquire or construct major capital facilities, typically financed from sale of bonds, special levies, and state matching funds. So the fiscal year 24-25 budget has been developed assuming our current levy is coming to an end at the end of this year. So that's what the basis for the, as we built this budget. You can see there is really no harm in running out of funds for another year. I say that cautiously because as you look at the ending fund balance as budgeted for this fund, we're budgeting that for over $60 million for an ending fund balance. But in this fund, that doesn't really go very far because if you look at actual expenditures in fiscal year 23 and even the adopted budget of last year, we are, you can see what those numbers are. So from that $60 million, that can be spent very quickly in this fund. So I'm saying that because as we go out for the levy in the fall, it's kind of imperative that we're successful with that. Otherwise, we're might have to restructure some of our upcoming projects. The debt service fund, so again, this is budgeted entirely on our debt service requirements, and based on our prior bond issues, all of those repayment schedules, they're all structured differently. So they're clearly not an even repayment schedule. Some of those vary greatly. Some of them have upfront principal payments. Some of them principal payments are down the road. We happen to be in a time frame where we don't have large principal payments coming up in the next few years. So that would be the reason if you see the budget or fund balance in this fund kind of doing kind of a roller coaster ride. It's just we budget strictly based on our debt service needs. So, and that's what this fund represents, or that's what these amounts represent. The ASB fund is our extracurricular budget, primarily driven by heavy student involvement in the development of this budget. It is intended for classes, clubs, athletics, things like that. And we are, however, making an attempt to start drawing some of these balances down. You can see we've maintained this around $2 million fund balance over the past, I'll say, several years. And so we are really focusing on the real true needs of this fund and starting to draw those balances down and use them in other ways. And then the last fund that we budget for is the Transportation Vehicle Fund. This fund is only for the purpose of purchasing pupil transportation equipment, which is buses, funded through the state depreciation reimbursement. And so basically we budget to purchase buses to the extent that we receive those depreciation funds. So this, I believe this $2.6 million expenditure, I think, if I remember right, that was for 7 buses based on the estimated cost of a bus. So, it's just what we get in, we plan to spend and keep our bus fleet updated and on the road. Okay, that concludes the presentation. Time for questions. I do want to point out there is an appendix to your presentation which reflects any updates to our fines and fees schedule, which you can see there at the end of your presentation. But we are here for questions.
Dr. Clark.
If I can, towards the end, there was staffing as a % of total budget. And the expenditures were certificated salaries, classified salaries, and payroll taxes and benefits. And then the second category, supplies and professional services. But professional services has got a $10 million projected increase. And I'm trying to figure out both the source of the money and the services that expand it.
Okay, so keep in mind, professional services includes things like our insurance, utilities, major expenditures like that have been increasing greatly that you wouldn't necessarily consider as a professional service, but they all fall under that Object 7 expenditure. But really, your insurance and utilities, those increased substantially. I don't have the percentages right at my fingertips.
And that also includes the non-public school, non-public agency for our special needs students.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, under MSOC expenditures, there's a category, supplies, that was significantly increasing this coming school year. What was the general cause of that increase?
We have that slide by object.
There it is, yeah.
This one right here, the 4 million. I don't have the details.
I'm sorry, I don't have that right handy off the top of my head.
Well, no, you're looking at it right there.
Well-
On supplies going across, 23-24 was 23.8. I assume that's,
Right, yeah, I see the data. I don't have the exact detail on what drives that $4 million increase. Is that what you're asking?
yes, yeah, because, anything that expands the budget, I realize, obviously, in terms of things like computers, you have to replace them on a regular basis and so forth, but I was just caught, but the MSOC, you have to declare it with the state, and then you only get a certain percentage that they actually forward, so I was just trying to account for that.
Let me do some digging, and we can
Okay.
detail that out to see if I can narrow that down.
Okay. And then, under staffing, we dealt with the sources of revenue so for argument's sake, each certificated staff member we're actually expending some 25,000 per staff member above what the state is actually supplying us.
Correct.
And so the question becomes, if this, those expenses have to have an ongoing source of revenue to be sustainable. And if you could just give me a little clearer picture of how that occurs.
Well, actually, so that, I didn't include that discussion in this presentation, but my discussion about the over formula costs of staff, you're right, when you take it down to the 1 FTE, it's about $25,000 more than what we're funded. And so those overages are supported through either our local resources, so our local levy, M&O levy, or, drawing a blank, fund balance, sorry. So between
okay.
tapping into fund balance or using our local resources to fund those excess expenditures that the state does not
All right,
cover.
and that takes us back to what we saw earlier in terms of that drawdown of our.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right, got it, thank you.
Any additional questions?
I just have a couple of questions. I'm just looking at that chart, and it says reduced 75.5 FTE, right? And But if you look at the bottom,
Right,
it says 50 and then, certificated, right? And then 20, what's that, 29.4?
you're trying to reconcile the 75.5 to the 20.5?
Yeah.
Okay, so the 75.5 is represented as reduced school-based or classroom positions
Okay.
that we just didn't have to, that left on their own through attrition or IVT that we did not have to replace. Okay? And then, okay, so there's that number.
Right.
Keep the two numbers separate. But then overall, as we, you know, maybe lost classroom certificated FTE, but in other programs across the district, we were able
Gaining.
to, because they're coming from different program sources, are able to hire more staff.
Right.
So the net difference is 20. But if you're just looking at classroom positions, we are comparatively year to year, we're 75 less than we were, but just through natural, you know, movement
Attrition,
and
attrition. and all
attrition.
that, yeah. Because I just want to make sure that the public understands that the reduction is not 75.5, it's it's 20 positions,
Right,
not 75.5.
exactly. So if you just look at our total FTE year to year,
Right.
it's 20, not
20,
70.
not 75, yeah. And also, I have another question, which is, can you give me an example of what's called district-wide support?
Sure. So district-wide support, that falls under Program 9700, which probably nobody cares about, but it is positions like, that would be your non-leadership, professional, technical type positions, your not nutrition services, your custodial staff, your maintenance, IT staff.
Nice.
Think of everything that's not in the
In
school,
classroom, yeah.
but supporting the district outside of another program. So it's like all those other positions that aren't grant-funded or in a school instructional, non-instructional positions. That's also a good term.
Thank you, thank you. I have a question for Raul. Raul, the chart that you were working on, which was the predictions, general fund forecast, that one. What was the formula you used to come up with the numbers that, I'm sorry, I meant the one that shows the increase of, yes, that one. So what formula did you use to figure out, let's say, outer years, 26, 20, 27, 28, the number of students, projected enrollment? How do you, is it because that we have families moving here or birth rate and what have you?
That's a great question.
Right.
There is this method that we call cohort survival method. And so the way that works is, let's just say I have 100 kindergartner today. I would like to assume that I would have 100 first grader next year. That may not be so.
Right.
Because we look back in the last 5 years and we'd say, based on the history for the last 5 years, how many do we retain?
Right.
So in my example, if in the last 5 years I only retain 98%, and that 100 become 98 next year, first grader. And so you do that grade level by grade level as they matriculate into the grade. Now the question is, how do we predict kindergartner?
Right.
And that is the birth rate. So we look at the historical birth rate, and we say, based on the birth 5 years ago, we are anticipating X number of students coming into our system. And so then that becomes, and then of course, when you look at the 12 graders who are exiting, how many are exiting and how many of the 11 are now becoming 12? So when you put that all together, what came up is the number that you see here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have no questions.
Director Cook?
Yeah, I had a question. I know we had reduced the number of staff at the district office during the year here. And at the time, I had asked what we were expecting to save with that. I don't see that in here. Is that listed somewhere?
Director Cook, no, it's not shown on this presentation slide. I'm looking to Raul if he recalls what that number was.
I do not have the specific number for those reductions. However, all of those are embedded in the summary that you see here.
Okay. Do we have an accounting as to how many staff members we ended up letting go and the metrics that we used to decide which departments needed to have staff let go and basically that whole process? I just haven't seen an accounting of that, but it seems like the budget was the reason why we chose to do so. Is that correct?
We definitely have that detail that we used during the budget development process. Again, it's not shown as a slide per se. The rationale for the decisions that were made, that could be a separate conversation, but we could compile the actual data numbers and present that.
Okay. I guess I'll await that presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Director Song?
Nope, no questions for me.
And there's no questions for me. Seeing that we have finished questions on the presentation, the fourth presentation in the series, we are moving on to the next section. And I'd like to ask if there is a motion from one of our directors.
Move to open the public hearing.
I second.
We'll start to see if there is any video comments received or written comments.
Good evening, President Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Curry. There were no online comments, whether written or video, received for this public hearing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a board member to make a motion?
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
A motion has been made to close the hearing. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 5-0.
You want a motion for the full budget?
Yes, thank
All
you
right.
very much.
So I move approval of the Kent School District 24-25 annual budget.
I second.
There has been a motion made and seconded for the approval of item 4.01, resolution number 1682, 2024-2025 district budget adoption. We are now open for discussion.
If I can, Madam Chair.
Yes.
All right, there's so many tough decisions that go into this because, number one, the most obvious was the adjustment coming out of the COVID-19 funding and the subsequent ESSER funds, and then trying to realign that with the actual student count and staffing counts. And then, of course, the issue constantly that we struggle with is reliability of the state to come forward. Among the things that we still struggle with are significant costs in terms of special education. And you know, we are a busing district and all the particular requirements that go with that. And the state does give us funding, but the issue is always how well are we serving our students, and there's never a perfect answer for that. The other part is that we are trying to, of course, get to that point of stability, and I'm very thankful that KEA and our certificated staff have come forward and helped us get to a plan where we have a structure that's stable for 3 years. So the ability to begin to look at the reduction of that debt that's sitting out there becomes now much more in focus and more manageable. So I want to thank the staff in terms of what they've done in terms of the very grand review of all of our particular expenditures and funds. And I look forward to adoption of this budget, that we can look forward to a stable year.
Thank you. Director Farah?
No.
Director Cook?
Yeah, I'm looking at the resolution 1682 as part of this, and I noticed that we are transferring over $750,000 to the capital projects fund. I didn't hear anything about that. Maybe I missed it when it was discussed. What is the purpose of that?
Ms. Tyler will come up and answer that question.
Yeah, thank you, Director Cook. So the purpose of that transfer is to transfer salaries that are supported through the technology levy. Basically, you can look at it two ways, either reimbursing those salaries from the general fund or transferring funds over to the general fund. Typically, it's the latter because payroll is always run through the general fund. So those expenditures show up in the general fund, and so the tech levy is supporting those expenditures. So that's the purpose of that transfer. And it's an estimated number. It just depends on which staff we choose to charge to the tech levy.
Okay, that makes sense. But as far as that goes, normally the board has an approval limit of if I'm reading that, or if I'm understanding this correctly and remembering it, it's $10,000. Is that right, or is it a higher dollar amount?
I don't think I'm understanding your question.
I'm just curious because we're essentially saying that we're going to transfer over from the capital projects fund over to the general fund an amount up to $750,000. Are we going to still be approving each time they do move money from the capital projects fund to the general fund, and provided a purpose for why we're doing so?
Okay, got it. The answer to that would be no. Once you adopt this budget, that transfer in total, unless we exceed that $750,000, then you're approving that those monthly transfers can happen.
Okay. I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tyler.
Director Song?
Nothing's coming to I think I asked most of my questions last time. But yeah, nothing for me as of the current changes.
No. Again, thank you. We understand that this is fourth time, and everybody's also had our 2x2s and many opportunities to ask questions. So thank you very much. And I know that we have all looked at this in depth.
If I may take just a moment to thank our team.
Yes,
I want to thank our staff for not only the year-long process that it took to end here today, but really to look forward. I wanted just to publicly thank them. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you on behalf of the entire board. I'm looking for Raul to. Oh, there he is. Okay. I'm like, I'm searching around the room. For those of you online, he was seated and the podium was in my way. So thank you. Okay. Seeing that we have an open motion and it is seconded, we are moving to the question. All those in favor of adoption of item 4.01, resolution number 1682, 2024-2025 district budget adoption, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 I'm sorry, could I hear again if there was one on the phone?
Aye.
Yeah, I didn't vote yes on this.
Okay. All those opposed, please raise your right hand and say nay.
Nay.
The motion passes 4-1. As that is the last item on our agenda, it is 5:54 and we are adjourned.